Hello friends, I'm Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom has a fun mini stamp and MDF release that's available now. There are 3 stamp sets that are part of the new March 2025 release, and also 2 MDF shapes. If you weren't aware, the US die manufacturer that Jaded Blossom has used for years and years recently shut down, so they have had a little delay while they're looking for a new die manufacturer. They're hoping that next month their April release will go right on track. So for March, they decided to release just a few stamp sets and also MDF shapes. The first stamp set is called Handmade Kindness. This is so fun. You could use some of the sentiments for the front of the card, but most of them would be perfect stamped on the back of the card. And my favorite, world's most expensive card, and that is definitely the truth. The next stamp set is called Thinking of You. It includes several large silhouette stamp images. There's a fern branch, cattails, a dragonfly, and a couple of butterflies. Plus it has the sentiment Thinking of You in a lovely font. The last stamp set is called Everyday Vertical Greetings. Lots of great sentiments that you could use throughout the year. There are several different sizes of fonts on this set. And for many of the sentiments, you can cut them out with Jaded Blossom's Sentiment Strip die set. A few of the sentiments included on this set: thank you, congrats, miss you, love you. There's thinking of you, congratulations, thank you so much, happy birthday, and several others. And here's a look at the 2 new MDF shapes. If you haven't seen Jaded Blossom's MDF shapes before, I recently shared a video featuring several of them with their gnomes and also their gnome friend critters. And I will link that video at the end of this video if you're watching on YouTube. The 2 new shapes released coordinate with 2 of their die sets. The first one is Rounded Tag Die, and it's the larger size tag. The other one is Mason Jar Die. This is such a cute die. You can fill your jar with all kinds of fun goodies, and it's perfect to use throughout the year. The rounded tag has the hole cut out at the top, so you could add some ribbon or twine. And the Mason Jar MDF piece has the little hang tag ring at the top. For 2 of my card designs, I will be using pattern paper. This is from Reminisce. It's their Grown with Love collection. I used this collection, I think about 2 years ago with one of Jaded Blossom's garden releases. So I thought it would be perfect to pull it out today. We're heading into spring very soon. If it is still available, I will have it linked in the description box, along with all of the other products I use in this video, including the new release from Jaded Blossom. So let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I've already gone ahead and die cut out a large scallop rectangle, and I used a set from Jaded Blossom. I have both sets 1 and 2, so there's a nice variety of different rectangles. For the scallop border that goes along the side of this narrow strip, I also used one of the rectangle dies. I just selected one of the larger ones. After I cut it out, I trimmed off the one side, so it's the perfect layer for this narrow strip. This is a great option if you don't have a scallop border die. Plus, Jaded Blossom's Scallop Rectangle dies are unique since they have this fun little cutout right along the edge of that scallop area. After adhering the scallop strip on the right side of this leaf pattern paper, I'll add that piece on the Scallop Rectangle die cut. Now I'll put ATG tape on the back and layer this piece on some light green cardstock. And you'll only see a tiny peak of that green cardstock around the scallop border. I'll put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. This card will be featuring the large cattail image. I'm stamping it on some craft cardstock, and I already have that cardstock piece and stamp set up in my mini MISTI. The ink color I'm using is Catherine Pooler's Cargo. It's a slightly greenish brown color, and I thought it would be perfect for the cattail image. I did set up the stamp image so the very bottom goes off the edge of the cardstock piece. I think my ink pad is getting a little bit dry since I didn't get a very solid impression, but I'm okay with that. I think it still works nicely on this craft colored cardstock. I will be stamping a couple other images from the stamp set. First, I need to clean the cattail stamp, and I'm using the stamp chamois from scrapbook.com. The other two images I'm stamping on this panel, the dragonfly, love this tiny little image, and also one of the butterflies. Once I have those set up, I'll use the same cargo ink color, and I'll stamp those up a couple times to get a good solid impression. Now I'll layer this piece on the same dark green cardstock. And generally for my cardstock layers, I add an additional 1/8 inch. For the image panel, I did cut it just a little bit smaller than what's indicated on the card sketch. It's 2 3/8 inch by 4 1/8 inch. So that cardstock layer is the measurement listed on the card sketch. Before adhering it down, I did put a scrap piece of cardstock on the left side of the image panel, just in the area where it goes off of that dark green pattern paper strip. For a sentiment, I stamped out Thinking of You. This is the sentiment included on the set, and I cut it out using a stitched oval die from Jaded Blossom. I'll adhere the oval sentiment in the lower right-hand corner. Before adhering it down, I am putting a scrap piece of cardstock behind the sentiment, just on the right side. Then I'll put Barely Art glue on the back and adhere it in place. And I didn't mention earlier, but I am using some card sketches for inspiration. The first sketch is from the Paper Players. It's sketch number 138. For embellishments, I'm using Jaded Blossom's original Embellishment Cluster die set, still one of my favorites. I cut out 2 small hearts from some silver pearlescent cardstock, and I'll add those hearts right above the sentiment on the right side. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. You can see on the second card, I got a much better stamped impression. For card design number 2, the card sketch is from Cards TV. This is sketch number 61. I selected 3 pattern papers from the Grown with Love collection. For the very background, I'm using this design that looks like a terracotta pot. For the wide strip going down the center, have some of the dark green tone-on-tone. And then for the narrow strip going across the card, it features lots of different fern branches. I'll be layering all 3 pieces on some dark green cardstock. Add the wide dark green tone-on-tone pattern paper piece down first. And before adhering the fern paper, I'll put a scrap piece of cardstock on the right and left side, just in the area where it goes off of that wider pattern paper and cardstock strip in the center. That way it stays at the same level. And you can use any scrap cardstock you have on hand since it won't be visible. I use white cardstock since at that time I had a piece sitting on my table. Now I'll layer the background piece on dark green cardstock. Now on the card sketch, it has that background cardstock layer of full A2 size. I cut mine 1/8 inch smaller. So it's 4 1/8 inch by 5 3/8 inch. That way you can still see some of the white cardstock from the card base. And on the back, I've already stamped World's Most Expensive Card. This card will be featuring one of Jaded Blossom's famous gnomes. The vines for her hat and also the potted plant that she's holding are from the Gnome Dies Garden Add-on die set. Just to save time, I've already assembled the gnome. If you need to see how to assemble one of the gnomes, you can watch one of my previous Jaded Blossom videos. I even have a Jaded Blossom playlist on YouTube with, I think, over 65 videos since I love using their products. To help the image stand out against the background, I did add a white stitched oval die cut, and the die set is from Jaded Blossom. I adhered it down using glue. I did pop up the gnome using foam dimension, used some of the small foam squares and large foam squares from scrapbook.com, used their 1mm thickness. For a sentiment, I stamped "Sent Late to extend the celebration." This is such a fun sentiment. I cut it out using Jaded Blossom's mini tag die set number 3. I started off following the design of the card sketch, but for the image and sentiment, I have changed it up. That's the nice thing about card sketches. You can follow them exactly or simply use them for inspiration. For embellishments, I'm adding some of the twinkle stars, and the images are included on the Embellishment Cluster die set. Put 3 in the upper right-hand corner and 2 in the lower left-hand corner. To pick up those tiny die cut pieces, I did use the wax tip end of scrapbook.com's Craft Pro Pick tool. For a final finishing touch, using a white gel pen and adding a few highlights on her hat, her nose, and also the pot for the plant. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For the second card, I did shift the oval on the left side of the card and put the sentiment more on the right side, trying to follow the design of the card sketch, but for the card I recorded with you, decided to put the image and sentiment in the center. The pattern paper I'm using for card design number 3 is from scrapbook.com, using their Ombre paper pad in A2 size. This is one of my favorite paper collections. Since the backgrounds are already made, the card recipient will have no idea that I didn't spend lots of time ink blending this background. I'll be stamping several images on the background, starting with the large fern branch, putting it in the center of this piece. I have my paper set up in a mini MISTI, and the ink I'm using is from Honeybee Stamps. It's their intense black ink. And I will ink up this stamp several times to get a nice solid impression. Need a little more ink in the center. I love the look of the silhouette images against the ombre background. I will be stamping a few more images. Since I love this little dragonfly, thought I would put 3 of them around the fern branch. I'll stamp the first dragonfly in the upper left-hand corner. And I will ink up this stamp a few times to get a nice solid impression. With lovely pattern paper and beautiful stamp images, this would be an easy card to mass produce. Once I'm happy with the first dragonfly image, I'll clean off the stamp with my stamp chamois. And I'm also wiping it on my hand, making sure that stamp is dry. I'll put the next dragonfly in the lower right-hand corner, and I'll be adding 2 dragonflies there. And they'll be flying different directions. This second dragonfly is flying toward the right. I'll clean off the stamp, reposition it, and stamp the final dragonfly, which is flying upward toward the left. Since the door of my mini MISTI was wet, I did wipe it down using a crafty cleanup cloth from scrapbook.com. Otherwise, this stamp may not have attached with that wet surface. For a little extra detail on the background, decided to add some black watercolor splatter. Grab my paint set. I've had this one for years and years. With my paintbrush, I'll gently tap it over the card, and I'm focusing on the upper left-hand corner and lower right-hand corner for the splatter. Then I'll set aside that panel, let it dry. Don't want to smudge that black paint. I'll be adding a black frame. And I cut this out using Jaded Blossom's Rounded Rectangle Internal Scallops die set, the largest size. On the back side, I've already put some double-sided adhesive tape. This is the 1/8 inch size. I'll remove the release paper. Then I'll adhere it on the front of my card. And I probably should have put the frame down before stamping the dragonflies, since I am covering up just a little bit of one of the wings on the right side. I'm trying to make sure to line it up with even borders around the scallop frame. Now I'll put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. I love having the A2 size paper pads from scrapbook.com. You don't have to do any trimming. They fit perfectly on an A2 size card base. And I always attach my card fronts at the very top, so I'm doing it upside down on screen simply because that folded area is closest to me. And if it's not cut perfectly, I can always trim off the bottom where it's not folded. For a sentiment, I'm adding thank you. Although the full sentiment is thank you so much, I didn't want it quite that long, so I masked off the so much and then stamped it. I cut it out using the sentiment strip die set. And I made sure to leave a little extra space at the bottom of the sentiment, since I want to cut a fishtail on the bottom of each of the banners. Use dark green cardstock for that second banner. To adhere the two pieces together, I'll put some clear double-sided adhesive tape on the back of the sentiment banner, just on the top area. Then I'll layer it on the dark green banner. And I'm angling the sentiment banner just a little bit so you can see the green banner on the left side and underneath. Now I'll put more double-sided adhesive tape on the back, remove the release paper, and just to make sure it stays in place, I'll also put just a little bit of Barely Art glue. Now I'll add the sentiment banner in the upper left-hand corner. So there is my finished card. Decided to keep it nice and flat. It's always good to have cards on hand where you don't have to pay additional postage. I also wanted to show you what I created using the new MDF shapes. So this is the rounded tag, and I decided to add this beautiful yellow sunflower. The die set is sunflower dies from Jaded Blossom. For the background of the tag, I used some tone-on-tone blue pattern paper, then added some brown and white twine. And for the mason jar MDF piece, decided to go patriotic. Filled it with red, blue, and teal stars. The star dies are from Jaded Blossom. I added the sentiment, celebrate the red, white, and blue. And this is included on Jaded Blossom's God Bless America stamp set. I cut a fishtail on the right and left side of the sentiment and adhered it at the bottom of the jar. I used white pearlescent cardstock for the jar and silver mirror cardstock for the lid. Now here's another look at the 8 cards and projects I made using Jaded Blossom's March 2025 release. I love the new stamp sets, and it's so fun to have more MDF pieces. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links in the description box below. Jaded Blossom never disappoints with their amazing releases. I know they're really excited to get back on track with their die releases, and that will be coming very soon. But until then, we do have this new fun stamp and MDF release. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.